Break out those timelines and let your knowledge shine. It's been a week, so let's see what you learned. Eden Hope Academy. Break out those timelines and let your knowledge shine. It's been a week, so let's see what you learned. Eden Hope Academy.
Hello, we are on week 6. So on your card, you'll put week 6, card number 2, and we're going to put Washington, that's George Washington, crosses the Delaware. Now, George Washington had suffered several defeats in the war against Great Britain with the colonists, the American Revolutionary War. And on Christmas Eve, or on Christmas Day at 11 o'clock at night, his army crossed a half-frozen river at 3 locations. Now let's think about this. There are many pictures that describe this scene, and it says that his army lacked provisions, meaning they didn't have enough clothing and they had very little food. And so they had such meager clothing rations that the men's feet were bleeding and they had no shoes even though it was the middle of winter. So many had to wrap their feet in cloth and march in the snow and the ice with their feet just covered in cloth. And it said that through the snow was a trail of blood from these men's feet. So think about the dedication that these men must have had to do that for the founding of our country. It's pretty significant. So on this Christmas Day, why would George Washington choose Christmas Day? Well, he chose it because the men on the other side were not expecting to have to battle on Christmas Day at all. It was fairly unheard of. Everyone took off Christmas Day, and so they would not have expected it. And so he crossed with 2,400 soldiers, and he braved the icy, frozen river. So there were huge chunks of ice in this river, and he reached the New Jersey side of Delaware just before dawn. So if it was just before dawn, it must have taken him quite some time to get across that river and to march. The other 2 divisions, made up of 3,000 men from the artillery of the Continental Army, failed to reach the meeting point at the appointed time. At about 8 a.m. the next morning, December 26, Washington's remaining force separated into 2 columns and reached the outskirts of Trenton, New Jersey, and descended on the unsuspecting Hessians. Trenton's 1,400 Hessians, they were groggy from the previous evening of having fun, and so they were, I can't wake up kind of feeling. And they underestimated what the Patriots, or the Continental Army, they are also called Patriots, how many there were and how big the threat was. And so Washington's men quickly overwhelmed the Germans' defenses. Now, did I say Germans? I did. Just because it was between King George and the colonists, the American Revolutionary War, doesn't mean there were just 2 different countries involved. In fact, Louis XVI, who we talked about last week in the French Revolution, he actually spent quite a bit of money helping the Americans, and he also sent troops. And the Germans sent troops as well to help King George III. So they were fighting, George Washington was actually fighting against German troops during this battle. Although several hundred Hessians or Germans escaped, nearly 1,000 were captured and only 4 Americans died. Because most of Washington's army failed to cross the Delaware River, he was without adequate artillery and was forced to withdraw from the town. So this was not truly a big, significant victory for George Washington, but what it did was it raised the morale of the people, and it gave them that oomph they needed, and a small victory that they needed to rally and to continue to fight. So I want you to think of something in the Bible or something in your own life where it just looked like, oh, this is never going to happen. And then God just gave you a little victory so that you could make it to the end. Can you tell me about that? If you email it to me, I would love to either respond to you or post it on Facebook, okay? So that's George Washington crosses the Delaware River. On week 6, card 3, and we're talking about the Battle of Yorktown, and it happened in 1781. And this happened in the city of Yorktown, and it was between George Washington and French troops. So George Washington and French troops were together because if you remember from some previous videos, Louis XVI helped dramatically the Americans win the Revolutionary War by sending money and troops to the colonists to help them. And so during this battle, the French were helping as both ground troops and also at sea. And so General Cornwallis, it's spelled Cornwallis, was the general in charge of the British troops, and he had 9,000 British troops, and George Washington had 17,000. So who had more? Did you say George Washington? You were right, but he had the help of the French. And earlier, the French fleet had departed from Saint-Domingue, which is a French colony, which is now Haiti. I think I pronounced that incorrectly. For the Chesapeake Bay, which is in Maryland. And just as he did, Cornwallis chose the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay as his base. So we're thinking about this, and Cornwallis chose the same place that the French general was coming to, or the commander of the French fleet was coming to from Haiti. And so Washington realized that since the French fleet was coming in, that now was the time to act. So he ordered the Marquis de Lafayette, an American army of 5,000 troops to block Cornwallis's escape from Yorktown in Virginia by land, while the French naval fleet blocked the British escape by sea. By September 28th, Washington had completely encircled Cornwallis, and Yorktown with combined forces of the Continental Army and French forces. After 3 weeks of non-stop bombardment, non-stop shooting each other, that's 3 weeks. It's a really long time for that. And they did it both day and night with cannon fire and artillery. Cornwallis finally surrendered to Washington at the field of Yorktown on October 17th, 1871. Now, whose birthday is October 17th, 1871? If it's yours, then I want you to email me because you are a Battle of Yorktown birthday boy or girl then. Pleading illness, Cornwallis did not attend the surrender ceremony, and instead he sent his sword with his second in command. So Cornwallis finally admitted that he had been beat. George Washington had been victorious, and they settled it with a negotiation ceremony, and that was basically the final war, or the final battle in the American Revolutionary War. So the Battle of Yorktown was basically the final or the decisive battle. And there were a few more naval battles that took place, and there were a few more ground battles that took place, but the Battle of Yorktown was the real finish and what we consider to be the final victory of the American Revolution. And later, on September 3rd, 1783, at the Treaty of Paris, the war was finally over and the United States was a free and independent nation. So I want you to think about how hard that was to continue for 3 full weeks and how exhausting that must have been for those Americans. And I want you to think about the ways in your life that you've had to work really, really hard for something and it wasn't easy and it took weeks or months or years to obtain, but that God finally gave you a victory on. And I either want you to send it to me or to include it in your timeline card. Thanks so much.
We are believers, we are teachers, we are all God's creatures. We are opening up the doors to our home. We cherish the moments when we see our children with faith burning strong, learning at their own paces, smiles on their glowing faces. We're caring for their education. Come and join our family at Eden Hope Academy. We are believers, we are teachers, we are all God's creatures. We are opening up the doors to our home. We cherish the moments when we see our children with faith burning strong, learning at their own paces, smiles on their glowing faces. We're caring for their education. Come and join our family at Eden Hope Academy. We are believers, we are teachers, we are all God's creatures. We are opening up the doors to our home. We cherish the moments when we see our children with faith burning strong, learning at their own